Well, looky here. You are listening to someone who is bold, authentic, diverse, unpredictable. Baby, I am unapologetically Ramon, and you have entered my zone, the QB zone, baby. Hello, somebody.
Rock Legion.
So on this episode of the QB Zone, we are doing another Friends and Family Takeover experience. And my guest today is Shanae Joyce-Stringer, a very good friend of mine, who everyone who have supported my podcast know that she is no stranger to the QB Zone. And as usual, the unpredictability is one of the things that I love about this type of episode because I have no idea what my guests are going to ask me or want to discuss with me. And today's topic is relationships, but not your normal, not your usual relationship chat. A lot of times when you talk about relationships, it's from a romantic perspective. But today's episode does touch on those types of relationships a little bit, but we also talk about relationships with yourself, relationships with your parents, relationships with your friends. And it was a very interesting, enjoyable conversation for me. First time I've ever had those types of conversations when it comes to relationships. So I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. So here is Friends and Family Takeover number 3 with myself and Shanae Joyce-Stringer.
Hi, I'm Shanae Joyce-Stringer, and I am an author. I am an entrepreneur, as well as a certified life and relationship coach. And I'm excited to be here with Ramon on his podcast. And the subject for this episode is going to be relationships. So, relationships is a topic that I feel is always being debated, right? That whole men versus woman and going 50-50, all of the things that happens to be trending for whatever reason. Um, it keeps coming up. And so I want to talk about relationships, but we're not only going to talk about relationships with significant others. I actually want to start off talking about relations with ourselves.
Mm.
Yes. So I think it's important that we have a good relationship with ourselves. And I think that so many people don't realize that they really don't have a good relationship with themselves. And it's evident in the way that they carry themselves, it's evident in the way that they talk, right? It's evident in how they think.
Absolutely.
Even we can get down to physically, like how you treat your body.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you, Ramon, how do you rate your relationship with yourself?
That's interesting. Definitely need some improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do a lot of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And just from an internal standpoint, with a lot of things I've been through, I'm not really good at giving, and I've said this, quite a bit because I've been realizing it more and more. I don't do well with giving myself grace. I'm so willing to give other people grace and not myself. So I definitely think I need to do a better job. I feel like I've definitely done a disservice to myself when I look at the past, in that I've sought validation from the wrong people, places, and things. And so I think I'm at a place now where I am enjoying reconnecting with myself. I am enjoying in so many ways what's become my new normal. And in doing that, it hasn't always been pretty, it hasn't always been comfortable, but I am enjoying getting to know myself all over again. So it's kind of like I'm in a reconnection phase with myself.
Mhm. And I love that, right? Because one, we need to talk about being honest and transparent because if most people, that's making a generalization, but many people, if they were honest and they had to rate how they treat themselves, it would almost be considered neglect,
Right.
right? Because we get so caught up in our day-to-day lives and all our different obligations, and many people, have many titles. If you're wife, if you're mother, you boss, you CEO, caregiver, all of the things,
Right.
right? And it requires you to give so much of yourself to others that you ultimately find yourself at times in seasons of your life where you are in fact neglectful. And I love that the recent years, there's been so much talk about self-care, right? And you were like, you don't do a lot of self-care. And I posted a video the other day that talked about taking care of yourself in this season. When I think about this year and what this year can be for so many of us, that this is a year of recompense, this is a year of favor, right? This is a year of recovery. But what good is all of that? Good is it to have the full manifestation and all the blessings, and you're not healthy enough to receive it?
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about physically healthy, but like to the point where the blessing's there and you get doubtful, like, is this really for me? Right? You can't fully embrace it, you can't really receive it because, right, you haven't been doing the self-work, you haven't been doing the self-care. And I believe that self-care is so important. And what I was sharing in the little snippet of a video was that self-care is so much more than going to brunch with your girls, right? It's so much more than flying out with the fellas for a weekend because you're just trying to escape your reality. It's so much more than spending a few $100s at the spa. But true self-care really is when you get down to the root of self and you're able to identify your triggers. You are able to identify your traumas, right? You're getting to the place that you're comfortable with saying no. You're comfortable with, like, I'm canceling this because I just don't have the capacity for that. Like, that is also what self-care looks like really preserving yourself. And I think, like how you said, where I was like, I even had to do a self evaluation. Like, how have you been treating yourself? Because you hit it. We don't always give ourselves grace, but we'll give other people
Yeah.
miles and miles of grace.
A lot of times they don't even deserve it.
Don't even deserve it. And we made one misstep, like, girl, for real. And it could be minor. And we like overthinking, overanalyzing, real critical, right? Now we get the negative self-talk. Now we doubting. And we have to do a better job of that because, right, scripture even tells us like that we are to love our neighbors, we love ourselves. But the truth is sometimes we love our neighbors better than we love ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think about that from a state of self-care and our relationship with ourselves, that if we are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, why are we loving our neighbor better?
Mm. Yeah, that's true.
Right? So, what is it about me that I don't feel like I should be giving myself that level of grace? I shouldn't be treating myself to these nice things, these nice experiences, right? Or treat myself to just rest,
Yeah. Yeah.
giving myself permission to rest, read a book, put the work away. Yeah, I know we had plans, but no, I'm gonna cancel.
Hello.
I really just need some me time. So I think that it's so important for us in this season to really take care of ourselves, really work on preserving ourselves, because that's the only way we're going to really enjoy the promises that are to come, to really, in order for us to enjoy and fully embrace the blessings that will be bestowed to us if we really take care of ourselves in this season and make it a habit.
Yeah. Yeah. We make other stuff.
Even if you got to schedule it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like you got to prioritize yourself. I don't care what title is. You could be wife, you could be mama, right? Daddy, uncle, big sister, big brother. You have to prioritize yourself because if you not good, you really can't be good to nobody else.
Right. If you're not taking care of yourself, what quality are you actually giving to these other areas? Yeah,
And even it's to the point of like, what example are you showing?
that's true too. Yeah.
Like I run myself down to the ground to make sure y'all have all this. Like, what example is that?
Right.
And I'm sure many of us have seen that, have experienced that, right? We saw mama, grandma, auntie, uncle just work, 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 work,
Hello.
work, 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 work. Right? You knew they was tired.
Yeah, but they still
And
kept
they
going.
still kept going, right? And they still kept pushing, still kept moving. And you're like, whoa.
Hmm.
And so, right, because I said, what example, right? Many of us didn't model that. Work 3, 4, 5 jobs. Got to show up because we got to support every friend trying to be at every event, every weekend, all the time.
Right. Right.
All at the expense of self. And so I think it's so important for us in this season to really make ourselves a priority, that self-care becomes a habit for us, and that we really get to the place of really knowing ourselves, really getting comfortable with stillness and mindfulness practice. I won't get into all the yoga and stuff, and whatever works for you,
Right.
right? To get yourself back centered, whether that's prayer, whether that's reading, whether that's taking a walk, but really getting into the place that those things are priority. Like those things are just as important as the work that you do,
Mhm.
is what you're offering to others, that your relationship with self becomes equally, if not more so, important than the other relationships that you have.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk about relationships with parents.
Mm.
And I bring that up because when I think about something my therapist was saying, like why maternal and paternal relationships are important, because both of them teach you something. And so when one is absent, right,
Hmm.
it can definitely have an impact on you. And so she was saying that your maternal relationship really teaches you about nurturing and giving, right? But that paternal relationship should also be teaching you how to receive. And I was wondering, right? Like thinking about that, like the impact of parental relationships. And I think that it shows up even in your intimate relationships. Because again, people model behavior.
Right.
And even you would think, like, even with the absence of maybe one parent or the other, or maybe both, how that also impacts their ability to have intimate relationships, how we are able to really interact with other people based on what has been modeled, what have we seen, what have we observed, right? When it comes to our relationships, and we often hear about like the mother wound and the daddy wound, those things are real.
Absolutely.
And so I would like to explore with you, right? Like your relationship, how has your relationship with your parents impacted you to be who you are today?
So that's interesting because biologically, um I don't want to stop. So I was raised by grandparents. I was raised by my maternal grandparents, my mom's parents. And they've had me since I came from the hospital, to really be honest. Although my mom was in the house for a few years, my mom was a child. She was 16 when she had me. So, for all intents and purposes, my grandparents have been raising me since I came from the hospital because they were still raising her. Um, I refer to him as my mama's sperm donor. He was never in my life. And so what I've always thought was so amazing is that when I look at what my mindset was as a child, you want a relationship with your mom and dad. You want them to be there. My grandparents was there, but of course I knew they weren't my mom and dad. You know what I'm saying? And so there was always this void, this yearning of something that was there. Then as I go through high school and transition into college and I'm becoming more mature, I'm learning, I'm having, various life experiences, I'm seeing things from a different perspective. It made me realize that although I didn't have my biological parents, my grandparents did an exceptional job. And everything that you will want from a mom, my grandmother was that. She nurtured the nurturing, the love, the tough love when needed, instilling certain values, introduced me to God and fed that relationship consistently. And then you have my grandfather, the provider, self-employed man. So that whole business savvy kind of thing, that people see me with my endeavors really come from him from the business standpoint. Um, but just with education, my grandmother kept my head in books. That's why I love the books. I love to read books. I love to write books. I have the book scholarship in her name. She kept my mind in books. And I've always loved education because of her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what I always thought was so amazing was that if you met my grandmother, you probably thought she had her a degree or two. But she literally only had, back in them days, I can't remember what they called it, but for us, it would be vocational, like a certificate.
Mm-hmm.
But she was so smart because she read and she soaked up knowledge. And the way that I say that, so much of who I am today comes from them is because I look at a lot of things they've been through. And so I got their strength and how to handle life situations. A lot of times I try to think of how they would handle it or try to think of the things that they would say. Um, but also just being of service to other people, whether it's young people, whether it's my friends, or whether it's co-workers or people I don't even know like that. I really have a passion for giving back and being of service to people because that's the kind of grandparents I had. As a little kid, being raised the only child, and I was a good kid. I wasn't perfect, but I was a good kid. A little crazy, but I was a good kid. And so I was spoiled in the sense of my good behavior was rewarded with materialistic things. And so at a point where, let's say, clothes got too small or um, shoes got too small, or I've used up certain other things they bought me. We always donated those. We didn't throw those in the trash. We don't
Mm-hmm.
get those to the less fortunate. And so community service, I like to say I'm a community servant. I love philanthropy, I love giving back. That also was something that was instilled in me from my grandparents. I feel like I can be nurturing when needed. I like to inspire. Um, and then all that personality I got. I guess that's a combination of both. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, just all those traits and qualities, they've instilled in me from a little kid, and so it's kind of like living on their legacy and trying to be the best me I can be.
I love that, right? And I think that, I think I don't want to say it's a new term, but maybe more popular term when people talk about like their chosen family, right? May not be your bio family. And just knowing, right, the impact of your grandparents, right? Like even in the absence or pseudo absence of your bio parents, right? You had parents
Mhm.
that stepped in, stepped up, did the thing, right? And did a phenomenal job. And that has impacted who you are, right? You're literally living out the work. you're living out the values, you're living out everything that they have instilled in you, right? And I think that it is so important that we acknowledge that, right? Like being able to acknowledge their sacrifice and being able to acknowledge the impact that they have on you. And you met my grandmother. Um, and I think about, and I was raised, funny, similar story, right? Went from the hospital to grandma's house, but mom was raised me in that house and just had like really good support system. And I want to say we stayed there till I was 8. But still, even, you know, moving out to our own home, they were still very present and very active in the day to day. And so I think, like, you know, for me, my father was deceased by the time I was 10, didn't know him, didn't have a relationship, maybe like one photo. Um, and really not meeting his family or getting connected to them until after I was 10. But I think about my grandfather and just growing up, to me, I don't feel like I ever really had that void because my grandfather and my uncles just stood up
Absolutely.
and stood in the gap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even I can think about like being a debutante and being presented like Uncle I always knew he was gonna be, you know, stand-in father figure, right? And how those dynamics work itself out, that even in the absence of someone, right, that there's always someone that will step in and fill
Absolutely.
what feels like a void, right? And again, nothing can replace a mom. Nothing truly can replace a father, but just knowing that who comes and step in, right, into those roles are able to do it and do it so well
Absolutely.
that in areas where you feel thought you would have a void, when you begin to reflect, you're like, no, they filled all those. They filled all those roles. They fulfilled all those duties, all those expectations of us. Um, but I will like to ask you, what do you think is the impact of, and I know this talk comes up a lot, but what do you feel is the impact on youth who do grow up without fathers in the home?
I think that there is a so as a man, you have certain thought processes, certain expectations. Some of them can be stereotypes, some of them can be cultural expectations that are forced upon you. I think when you grow up without a father, to me, one of the things that a father does is there's life lessons that you learn from a father. There's a guidance that you receive. And it's like kind of learning, kind of teach yourself how to drive a car. You know, you take driver's ed, you have the instructor that teaches you how to parallel park, how to, you know, make a smooth left turn and back up, all that kind of stuff. And so it's like having to figure all that out without any guidance, without an instructor. And so I think that a lot of times young men make certain mistakes or they learn things by trial and error because that guidance, that foundation, those life lessons that are taught and instilled in you by a father, you miss those. Um,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that an uncle or a mentor can step into the gap and help kind of clean some of that up or alleviate it the best they can. But it's different when it's a father. It's different when it's your father. I'm blessed that along with my grandfather, I had uncles. I had his brothers. I had older cousins. But unfortunately, there's some people who grow up but they don't have that. They don't have
Mhm.
no kind of father figure. And a lot of times those basic life lessons, um, even something as simple as just how to treat a woman, how to have a conversation with a woman. A lot of men who get into these relationships and don't treat women right probably did not have a stable or a relationship at all with their father. There's certain basics that we as men should have that we don't.
Mhm. Good. And I think there's so much credence to what you said. The absence of a father and the gravity, right, of that impact, especially if there isn't anyone else that's stepping in.
Right.
And I love that you talked about having like a mentor and how important mentorship is um, to someone who is growing, especially in their development years, of having that mentor, having that role model that can stand in the gap and really give you the guidance, really give you some instructions, give you some real life stories, right? So that you can avoid, to the best of your ability, some hills, some valleys, some bumps along the way, because you had somebody who can pour into you, right? We talked about that void, to be able to fill that void by pouring into that cup that feels empty. Because of the absence of parents. And I have a former client of mine who really does a lot of work with um, the mother wound, because I think we always talk about, right, the absence of a father, right? We hear that a lot. But I don't think there's also a lot of attention to that mother wound, right? In the absence of a mom, and how that really impacts a person's development. I mean, all the way into adulthood, because I think it's a similar experience in the essence of like those certain lessons, certain conversations that a mother would have with you. It's something about that nurturing spirit that a mother gives off. And so when it's absent, when it's missing, right? I think almost equally when I think about young women, it's almost equally as missing your father, mother, that you still go looking for love
Absolutely.
and validation, right? Looking for praise in a lot of the wrong places, where it's usually our parents in our formative years who already affirm us so that we don't have to go out,
Right.
right? And we avoid that people pleasing
Mm-hmm.
in order to get that praise, in order to get that recognition, when it is usually in our developmental years that it is foundational in our households, that it starts there. The praise starts there. The affirmation starts there. The molding starts there. And so when you don't have that, it really begins to shape you, right? Developmentally, it begins to shape you, your mental um, processes. It begins to shape you emotionally when you don't have that presence of mom, don't have the presence of dad, right? It really begins to shape you and impact you in your formative years, especially if you never find that covering, you never find that one that really is able to stand in the gap
Absolutely.
or be a mentor or be your chosen families. And so I think that's so important, right? And when we start off talking about relationships with self and our relationships with parents, but I want to segue to relationships with friends.
Mm.
And I think like adult friendships are so different
Absolutely. Yeah.
than when you're, as a child, you're like everybody your friend, right? The whole class,
Right. Right.
whole school is my friend, and then it's something different as you get older, and then to maintain those friendships at a whole different level, where it's like, in your younger days, little Billy Bob changed class. You don't see him for a couple weeks. You finally see him at, recess. All is well.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like there's some friendships as you get mature, like, I ain't seen them in a year. Like, who that is? You
Exactly.
know me.
Right. Right.
So how do you maintain relationships with friends as an adult? Because to me, it's not easy.
It's not easy. And especially when you have, everybody go through things in life, some more than others. You're gonna have peaks and valleys, you're gonna have seasons. And that may be a period of time where you're going through a lot right now. And sometimes certain friends, some people don't know how to be there for people when they're going through certain things. I like to say or consider friends like seasoning that you cook with. You have
Mm-hmm.
cayenne pepper that you put on certain things, lemon pepper you put on certain things, garlic powder, whatever, whatever. But then we have all-purpose seasoning. You're gonna have friends that are just gonna have to fit in certain compartments. You really gotta compartmentalize people in your life, right? And so if I know I want to go out, turn up and have a good time, I know there's certain friends I can call for that. If I need a word from above because I'm going through something to feel inspired, I know the friends I can call and reach out to for that. And of course, you're one of those for me. And then if I'm angry and just want to talk some junk, I need to. That might be a little vulgar or angry. Just let me sit in this space for a minute. You know the ones that and then you got your ride of that no matter what it is, they're gonna always be there. And I think that once we learn how to compartmentalize people,
Mm-hmm.
it will change expectations not being met. I think a lot of time we place expectations on people that they're just not going to meet those type of expectations. Because if I have an all-purpose friend,
Mm-hmm.
I can't expect them to be there for me the way I would do. I can expect my friend that, let's say I only reach out to them when I want to party. They're good party people, good travel buddies. Um, I can expect the same out of them I would the ones that are all purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you learn how to put individuals in the right category, you learn how to feed that relationship. Some relationships are like children or they're like certain types of plants. Some need a little more nurturing than others. Like a cactus, you can just put a little water, they're gonna be good for a long period of time. But some you might have to water every few days. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that we set ourselves up for failure when we put the wrong expectations on the wrong people. First of all, we also need to, or next, we also need to realize everybody ain't meant to be our friend.
Right.
Some people, our interaction with them ain't supposed to go past hello. And everybody
True.
who you say hello to, it is not destined for them to know you personally. So when we first realize if this is the person we need to be past hello with, then realize what category you need to put them in. And then you can know how to feed that relationship or that friendship. And I think that that is how we can better enrich the various relationships we have in our life. Because also, those real deal ride or die or those all purpose friends, you can go weeks or months without
Mm-hmm.
talking. And baby, whenever y'all do get talk back at each other, you're gonna pick up right where you leave off. Or you may not talk every day, every month, but if you need them, they're gonna be there for you and vice versa. And so yeah, I think that's the best way to feed those kinds of relationships. And listen, you can be busy, you can have career, you can have kids, you can have a significant other. There's a lot of different hats, a lot of moving parts when you are an adult with those types of situations. But I think that, and some people may not understand it, but I really do feel like you can make time for what you want to make time for.
Right.
And so I may not be able to go out the half hour with you 3, 4, 5 times a goddamn month. Um, I also think that's when there's some care and understanding that, okay, we only can maybe do once or twice a month. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the best way to kind of feel relationships. And I know with me, it helps just because I like to not please people because I'm past that, but I like to make people happy. I like to be the type of friend for people that I want them to be for me. And so it helps me hold myself accountable, but also helps me to be aware of how I'm feeding every relationship and not giving priority to the ones that don't need priority.
Mm, I love that. And, as I said, it's not easy to, especially when you wear many hats and have so many responsibilities, right? And these relationships, these friendships, and it's like I love what you said about compartmentalizing. I think that's really key here, that you really are aware, right? What is really the nature of these friendships, especially as you're getting older? Because the truth is, as you get older, that circle gets smaller
Mm-hmm.
and tighter. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's a difference between friends and acquaintances, and something that's even gets murky for some folks.
Hello.
But I think like those true key friendships, they serve different purposes, serve different needs, and sometimes the seasons look different in those relationships. And the love, right? Your ride or die, you're gonna ride or die, whether we ain't talking 2 weeks, 2 months. When you circle back, they still riding with you. And I think that's so important as we navigate life, right? And you talked about people make time for what they want to. And so I think it's still important that we feed those
Mm-hmm.
relationships, not even for the other person, but even for ourselves, because especially if you have the title of mom or dad, caregiver, right? If you caregiver to your parents or you boss, you're this, those friendships are key to still feed you,
Mm-hmm.
and feed some parts of your life and your character. And so you still need that connection outside of, right, especially even your home based unit. It's so important that you continue to feed those relationships. And I love that you asserted the fact that a lot of times we get disappointed because of expectations, and a lot of times it's expectations we haven't even communicated
Hello.
to folks, and so they don't even know why you
Yeah, I had
mad
to
or in your
realize that.
feelings.
I had to realize that in my own life. Yeah.
That you're disappointed that, why they didn't show up for this, or why they didn't call me or come through, and not knowing, right, like that's what you expected or that's what you have wanted. But and sometimes it's like we're wanting something that we haven't even modeled ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, mercy. Yeah.
Right. But we disappointed that, they ain't calling my birthday. You ain't been to their birthday celebration in like 5 years. Like you really mad?
Right.
And I think that's so important, is right, as we're maturing and we're in our adult years and continue to grow and evolve. I think that it's also important that how we look at relationships also evolving, especially our relationships with our friends, and making sure that we're continuing to nurture them. Like you said, continue to water those relationships, especially those that have really been there for you in seasons. I can think of one really good friend, when I moved here to where I live on the West Coast, right, with no friends, no family. And I was like, oh, this feel like, like new girl at school. Like now I gotta make new friends for real. I gotta go be social and talk to people. Like they don't already know me. They don't already, got a little heads up on me. Like we're starting fresh
Uh-huh.
with building relationships. And I was like, this is new. It's a little different. I'm used to my solid crew. I don't need no new friends.
Absolutely.
Um, but I appreciate the acquaintances and some friends that I've met in the 2 years that I've been away. But I'm really grateful for those solid friendships that, in spite of the miles and the time zone differences, that have really been there and have really been solid. And whether we don't talk, whether the group chat is silent for a week or it's chirping every day, right? But just to know that those people are still there, and at any moment's notice that they're going to show up and they're going to be there,
Absolutely.
even if it's just to listen. And so I think that's so important for us, as we continue in this season of life and really taking an exploration of relationships, that we make sure we nurture every relationship. And so we talked about self so far. We talked about relationship with our parents, and we talked about friendships, right? All key relationships for any individual. So I do want to talk about, of course, relationships with significant others, intimate relationships. So my first question I want to ask, you're on your social media feed and all this, and I'm going to just say personally, I'm over the debate between men and women.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just wondering, especially, and I'm going to get specific, especially within the African American community, like when will the debate end?
Mm.
Because we're so at odds about what we won't do, what we not gonna do, what the standard is, what shouldn't be the standard, who doing what, who got what responsibility. Are you like my grandma, my granddad?
Yeah,
We're so pointing out all the things that are different about ourselves that we never focus on what can actually bring us together.
right.
What are our commonalities? But we too busy debating on who pay on first day, who put out on first day. Can you travel and not put out? Like what? I'm like, this is like we moved in 2023 and we're still debating these things.
I know it's ridiculous.
And so it's so concerning, especially when, we look at marriage rate, we see that millennials are getting married later. Women are choosing to give birth much later. And I don't put an age on those things because your time is your time. And when you feel it's right, and I definitely would say don't do it before you're ready.
Right.
Right. Or you really want to. But when you think of relationships over time, and we just see them just different ways and different phases. Does anything stand out to you that you feel has caused? Because I think there's always come like, why? I think I saw this post. Why don't relationships last like our grandparents' relationships? And there's so many ways that could go, but what do you think has contributed to the shift in how we view intimate partner relationships?
Ooh, I think, first off, I think people set themselves up for failure when they try to compare their relationship to other people. Your relationship and your journey is going to be what you're going to travel down. And what works for one couple doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And also, especially when you're on the outside looking in, you don't know what they went through to get to where they are, or you don't
Mm-hmm.
know some of the intricate dynamics that they had to maneuver through. So comparing yourself to another couple is one issue. I think that in a day and age when we have social media, that is such a huge presence in our society, professionally, personally, people have lost a sense of self. People don't even know who the hell they are. So they come into the relationship with these false glasses on,
Mm-hmm.
having the wrong expectations, having the wrong view of their own self. And so when you come into a relationship with false vision, you're going to get false results. And so
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people first need to reconnect with who they are. And also, what is your intention of even being in the relationship? Because that also sometimes is not on one accord with the other person. You got some people just do it for a personal gain, and the other person could be actually in love, right? So are our reasoning on the same page? And then also, I think that the standards have been lowered. When you talk about that quote of how people aren't staying together as much as our grandparents, and I'm not saying you got to conform to gender roles, but as a woman, you met your man's expectations, whatever that was. Whether he wanted you to be bare naked and pregnant and cooking, whether he wanted you to support him in whatever his dream was. Um, and then as the man, they provided. Grandfather provided. Grandfather took care of home, took care of his kids. You got these men sowing their wild oats, and you ain't even taking care of them. So there's a responsibility. There's a personal character presence that our grandfathers had, most of them, that the men today don't have. I also think that when you think of submissiveness, when you think of gender roles, I think a lot of time the word control comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a relationship, people are not property.
Right.
So therefore, you can't control the other person. You can only experience them. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that people, a lot of times, us men, not me included, they get confused, like controlling somebody. Like that's crazy to me. And so I think that there's a very warped mentality of what it means to be in a relationship and what it is that we really, really want and need out of the relationship.
Mm. I mean, you hit on so many things there. So let's talk about social media because I know that's something that comes up so much, right? Where people, I think there's also a debate there. Like, is your relationship real because you post on social media, or are they trying to hide you if
Absolutely.
you're not on social media? And you hit it on the nail. Like we kind of lost ourselves where everything is like, if it ain't on social media, right, it don't count.
Right.
It's not valid. We not matching their relationship goals. Something wrong with us.
Right.
And and there is this thing, this mindset of like, social media ruins relationships. And I would counter, is it that social media ruins relationship or how you utilize
Correct.
social media?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it has to do with um your foundation. Like, for example, I don't think social media ruins relationships no more than I think reality shows ruin relationships. I think when you go into these situations with holes in your relationship that you have ignored or swept under the rug, I think that social media and reality shows sheds light on them and you're no longer able to hide and pretend. So I've never felt like reality shows or social media ruin relationships. No.
Right. And you also talked about, right, comparison, and this quote says, comparison is a thief of joy. And I think that debate, I hope, ends soon, right? Of comparing, you're not like my daddy. You ain't doing things like my grandma would do. You ain't holding down a house like Big Mama. You ain't got nothing on my Uncle Joe.
Right, right.
And and I think, right, like just even hearing the verbiage, right, has an impact, right? But then when people start to receive, like, what you're really saying is I'm not good enough.
Mm. Yeah,
Right. And it's easy to just code it in because I'm comparing you to X, but what you're saying, what I'm bringing, me and who I am
ain't
in
enough.
my authentic self is not sufficient
Yep.
for who you desire, who you want. And you talked about submission and control. So it's almost like if I can control certain dynamics, I can form you. You like, now you like Play-Doh.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try and mold you, bend you, fold you into who I want you to be rather than accepting you
correct.
as you are and loving you as you are. And doesn't mean that the person don't evolve and grow. But it's like if you keep knocking them with your negativity and constantly comparing them and telling them what they ain't, who they not, what they don't do, what they never get right. How
Absolutely.
do you ever expect them to be what you desire them to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that that's so important that we, explore that, because I think that's what's happening a lot in relationships. I think that's why it's so easy for people to walk away, right? When we talk about grandparents and grandparents and give up marriage, it's so easy to walk away and feel like, like it's almost like car shopping. Oh, this car broke, I traded in for a new one.
Right. Right.
Maybe you didn't know how to use all the functions in the car.
Yeah.
Maybe you weren't well equipped as a driver to drive it proficiently. It's not the car,
Hello.
right? But it's so easy to just be like, well, I'll go to another car lot
Mm-hmm.
and pick something else out instead of studying. The thing that I love, Miles Monroe, Pastor Thies, did a lot of talks on relationship, and he talks about, right, like cultivating, and it speaks about it in the Bible, right, that you cultivate. And if
Mm-hmm.
you know anything about gardening, right, to cultivate something means that you're really nurturing it.
Absolutely.
You're really watering it. You're giving it the nutrients that it needs. And this is not like a 1 day thing and skip for 2 weeks, 2 months.
Now
This
become.
is something you consistently do. And I feel like any person who finds themselves in a relationship with a person is where you're constantly telling the person what you're not doing, what you're not great at.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't never did, like, you just not like. When you find yourself saying that, I think that you need to pause and see, how are you cultivating them?
Absolutely.
How are you watering them? Because those words are negative. You're not watering nothing. You're not feeding their soul. You're not giving them no nutrients. And you're wondering why they're not growing and changing.
Correct.
But when you begin to pour out with a right spirit, when you begin to pour out in love, you'd be surprised how they mold, grow, and shift and evolve, because you have been pouring out from a right spirit. You've been pouring out with love. You've been tending to your garden.
Yeah. 'Cause that's what we should be doing with these relationships. We should be enhancing each other.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not enhancing each other, what are we doing?
That's good.
Yeah.
Like you said, people have different reasons for being in relationship,
Yeah.
and it's like, if you're going to be part of my life, I'm not plugging, I am single, that ain't why I'm single. But what I'm saying is, right, I know what I know what I bring to the table. And I know what I already have in existence. And if you can't come add to that or help me make it better, help me be better, inspire me to be better, then there's no reason for this connection. And vice versa, if I'm not feeding you, I'm not pouring into you, I'm not trying to help you, enhance you, support you, then we have no business being together, because what's really happening is we're draining each other.
Right.
We're starting to deplete each other.
Mm-hmm.
And real telltale signs, if you worse off when you got with them than when you was without them, that's a clear sign this not for you.
Oh.
And it's a clear sign. And I'm not talking about bad times y'all had a bad break, right? I'm talking about, like, consistently you've seen a steady decline of resources,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of opportunities, moments, stuff you used to do, no longer can do.
That should speak volumes.
It should speak volumes to you to let you know, we need to put on the brakes here, because something not right.
Because you can do bad by yourself. How are you going to do bad or do worse with somebody?
I'm trying to tell you. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I think that some people really will, like, they really own this body and class stuff, like, ride down here forever. And I'm like,
Right, right, right.
honey, all the wheels done fell off that car. What y'all still riding on?
Hello.
What are we still riding and then dying? They ain't there dying for.
Mm-hmm.
right? To continue to be in a relationship for the sake of being in relationship. So I know this has come up a couple of times talking about social media and dating, and in a little message group we talked about a little bit this new trend of if you're dating someone and they want to take you on a trip. Or more importantly, let me be more specific, a man is sometimes first meeting a woman, or this now per se their first trip, and that man flies the woman out. Should there be the expectation that sex will happen?
So here's the thing with that. I don't think it's right for a man to assume that a woman finna give him some sex just because he paid for a trip. However,
Mhm.
I think, I don't know if I want to say it's common knowledge, but I think that people ain't stupid. And I think it's safe to assume
Mhm.
that if me and you have been having conversations and we clearly like each other, we getting to know each other, whatever, whatever, and I fly you out to come see me, or we live in the same city and I book us a trip to wherever, it is safe to assume that a man is doing all of this because he thinks that that's going to get him what's between your legs. However, a real man who doesn't have to depend on materialistic stuff and play these games and all this kind of stuff, he can get it without doing all that.
Mhm.
It could just be simply off of personality and how he treats her. I think that is a touchy subject, especially in the days of, Me Too movements and women being
Right. Rape culture.
because, women nowadays are so independent, which is wonderful. And it's like, oh, you think I'm gonna stick with you just because you bought me a plane ticket to Vegas and put up in a hotel? I can do that for myself.
Mhm.
So you're not doing anything for me that I can do for myself, but you still think I should give you some cooch.
Mhm.
I think the best way to even eliminate that kind of discussion or any kind of false hope or failed expectations is conversation. Not to be like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
taking on this trip. Are you going to give me something? No. But I think
Right.
if we're communicating and
Mhm.
we're getting to know each other, we can pick up on the vibe
Right.
in regards to if we're going to go to this next level. It's just like being in the club. And a guy think that because he bought you 2 or 3 drinks, that he's obligated to your phone number. Like, what? Or,
Right.
oh, I'm finna buy to go to his drinks, I'm finna take her home and smash. No. And then you go home and she just chilling, look like you crazy, think y'all just finna hang out. No. I just think that men a lot of times make these types of situations more complicated than it need to be. When instead of trying to play these games and all that kind of bullcrap, just simple conversation and communication and make sure
Mhm.
we're foot to the vibe. Now, some of y'all women in this city girl day and age will have a man thinking you finna give it to him. And he will pay bills and he will fly y'all and he will do all this kind of stuff. And y'all know y'all have no interest in sleeping with him. Now I think that's wrong when you give false hope or you what's the word? Leading him on. Now that's wrong.
Mhm.
That's wrong. Um, but I don't think that it's fair for a man to assume that just because he spent money on something, she's obligated
Right.
have sex with him. I don't think that's fair to assume that. Because also you got to remember what kind of chick are you dealing with? Because some women are used to certain accommodations. They're used to a certain lifestyle any damn way. So you
Right.
doing all this ain't nothing special to make them want to sleep with you.
Mm-mm.
Because y'all women, in my opinion, know within the first few minutes if this is somebody you'd ever sleep with.
Usually.
And a man can, like I said earlier, he can spend all kind of monies, take you shopping, buy a phone bill, wine and dine you, and you ain't really, you just enjoying the wine and dine. You don't really want to sleep with the man. But old manager down the street at Popeyes give you good conversation, baby. You better sleep with him the first night. I think men need to step their game up and men need to communicate better and stop thinking it's a price tag on a man, on a woman's body, or on a woman's pleasure. It's not a price tag on it.
Right.
Spending money on her is not earning her body.
No. Now, and I think and that's kind of the nature of the conversation that I was having, in this group of women. And right, you hit it, Me Too movement, rape culture, and I'm like, some of this is what this is giving off, right? That expectation, like almost prostitution. I paid for flight, hotel, so in exchange, you don't give me my body. So you're equivalent, you're putting equivalent to a trip, a hotel room to my body
Hello.
because you paid for some steak and lobster.
Hello.
I got to give you a piece of me, share my naked body with you because you brought my flight cross country.
Right.
And also thinking about the fact it's communication.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where we got to the place of where we we too grown to have adult conversations.
Right.
And
Correct.
those conversations should really happen even before you get on a plane
Hello.
and travel, because a lot of, like you said, leading on, what was the nature of y'all conversation before you got on the flight? What was some of the stuff? What kind of pictures was you sending? What
Hello.
kind of texts were y'all exchanging? What little comments he or she was making, right? That you kind of like ignored or, put a little silly face, right? And now you there and you giving off a totally different vibe. And I'm not saying no, you don't proceed, you don't want to, don't pass go.
Correct. Because just because if and back up, if you and this woman, or you and this person, if y'all conversations ain't never went into a sexual direction, y'all ain't exchanged no eggplant emojis, and especially if y'all ain't shared no pics. And not to say you have to share pics, but I'm just saying, if there's been no aspect of y'all conversation and interaction that has gone in a sexual direction, do not think that because you took her out to eat,
Mm-hmm.
not think that because you paid for a plane ticket, she finna sleep with you. There has been no insinuating, no nothing to cause you to think this person want to sleep with you. Because first of all, most people ain't gonna turn down no free meal. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
and most people ain't gonna turn down no free trip. You done paid for them to fly out to Vegas. Then I already made plans with their line sisters or they cousins, whoever else, finna meet them out there, and they finna have a girl trip on your dime. Have proper communication and not assumptions.
Right. So true. And I would say to ladies, don't go nowhere. Your debit card, savings account, credit card can get you back on your own.
You know, it's so funny you say that. I don't know if you remember this. I feel like it was something that was posted online. But a guy and a girl was in a long distance relationship. And they had been having a conversation for whatever amount of time, and he flew her out. And he paid for the plane ticket, paid for the hotel that he put her up in, paid for all that. And he felt like because of the nature of the conversations, that clearly he finna smash. Clearly they finna, make it do what it do. And she gets out there and she ain't giving nothing. He canceled that hotel and her plane ticket back home. Mama had to find her own coins and own way to get back home. Like you just said, don't go nowhere. Your debit card, your credit card can't take you. Mama was screwed because she did it.
Mm-mm.
And now she was
Yeah,
stuck.
stranded.
But he felt like she was teasing and playing her, so she deserved that. What do you think about that?
Well, you know what? I think that speaks to the character of him, right? It speaks to who he is as a person. And I get it. Nobody wants to be played, right? Nobody wants to feel like they have been deceived, and we don't know if, right, the level of deception, if there even was deception. But I will say that if you know that you are the source for this person's travel, the source for their lodging, the source of their meals for this period of time, and really you the source only because you're wanting something in exchange, something is really wrong with your character.
Yeah.
Right? Like what really is the true nature? Like if you telling me that sex is the determination of whether we really are in a relationship, right? Determining if we gonna go further, determining on if there'll be another date, then we having a totally different conversation. We clearly can't be
Absolutely.
on the same page that if the absence of sex makes you go that far to leave a person stranded, morally there's something else deeper, and it's good that you know now, right? Because if you withholding sex, mean they'll start canceling stuff. Like imagine being married and now, oh, you not giving me sex this week. I'm cutting off your allowance. I'm taking the keys to the car. It's in my name. You go stay at your mama's house. Like what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like if you would go to those lengths over sex, that even speaks to a lack of self control. Honestly, for the male,
All right. Or
right? If that's driving you.
or step your game up. Because a woman ain't gonna turn it down. You will never if you as a man step your game up and take care of business. Your woman is not finna deny you that. She could be pissed as hell at you, but she's still gonna give it to you because she knows she's finna enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you ain't got good game and you gotta depend on whatever your debit card or credit card can do for you, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I personally could not have I been in his situation. Now I'm not finna have you stranded in a goddamn Las Vegas. I won't do that. I definitely let you go on back and I've been unblocked you. If I was so bothered about the experience, but yeah, no,
Right.
I couldn't have made you stranded or and basically homeless because you canceled the hotel. I couldn't have did that. No, that's horrible.
No. And I've seen that example has happened multiple times. Because I even saw it like a week or two ago. I don't know, it was a shade room. And I mean, he was packing up the girl's stuff, and he was like, he spent maybe like $5,000. Now I'm like, I don't know where you done flew across country that's costing $5,000.
Oh,
But no, but then you hear her in the background saying like, so I've been had somebody spend that kind of money. Like, other people want to spend that kind of money on me. I'm like, girl, you supposed to say them comments for when you're on the other side of the
right,
store. Not while they about throwing your stuff in the hallway looks crazy, and it just baffles me that we are at that place. I don't know. I feel like we just at a whole nother low when it comes to relationships where we're making things so complicated that don't have to be complicated. And a lot of it can be resolved with just having honest communication,
absolutely. Absolutely.
honest and open communication, and being upfront about what you want, what you don't want, what you expect, right? What you willing to accept, what you can look past, what are absolute musts
Yeah, 'cause,
for you.
yeah, and two people that I love to kind of follow and listen to their advice is Deval and Kadeen Ellis.
Hmm.
He plays on this that show Sisters, and he has this YouTube channel with his wife and kids. But they've been married for a good long time, and they recently came out with a book. And one of the things that they said that I thought was so interesting was that when you're in a relationship or a marriage, and we're talking about communication and how important it is to, communicate and talk. And they made the statement that one of the things that benefit them is that they never stop talking. Their relationship is like a never-ending conversation because we should always be talking. We should always be checking in with each other. We should always make sure each other's good. What can I do to help you achieve this goal? What can I do to help make this day better for you? Are you okay? Is there anything I'm lacking in? Is there anything that's bothering you? Like, relationships really should be a nonstop conversation. And I never looked at it that way. And I think that that's really a dope way to look at it. Therefore, there's no expectations misconstrued. If there's a problem, it's not like you don't know about it or we don't know about it. You know what you're working with in regards to, is there some things you need to improve, or is some things you need to keep doing. And I think that most, just think about conflict resolution, whether it's with friends, family, business, or in romantic settings, I really feel like the common denominator why a lot of stuff just fall apart is bad communication.
Hmm.
Even if you feel like, and I think a lot of times this can happen in relationships romantically and with family, if you feel like being honest is going to hurt the person's feelings. One, there's a way to express yourself and be respectful. Also, yes, I'm aware that some people don't receive criticism. Um, some people can take offense to things, but if you're being,
Right.
all you can do is be honest in a respectful way and let them see that how they made. But as long as you've done your part to properly communicate, and I feel like communication will, like I said, I feel like it will alleviate, maybe not prevent everything, but I do feel like most things, if not all, could be alleviated with just, like you said, honest communication.
And I love that because I think that really is part of the solution for so many people. When you really have to assess the nature of your relationship when you don't feel like you can be honest, when you feel like I can't share how I truly feel, I can't share that what you did disappoint me, or I feel like you fell short. I feel like you may have failed me in this area where you really can't have honest conversation or you feel you have to tiptoe around certain topics. Or you just know certain topics you're just not going to talk about because it's a trigger, it's always an argument.
Mhm.
And it's also about your partner. If your partner is not receptive to you wanting to express yourself, express your feelings, or they limit the topic that you can discuss, or you can never critique them. It can never be something that they've deemed as negative. Those things are never up for discussion. I think that that's when you know, A, you got real issues,
Hello.
but B, that right, but there's also opportunity for growth, right? And sometimes it comes from, again, we talked about like relationships with parents and what's being modeled, right? Where they may not see mom and daddy really having conversations, right? Like talk at each other, but not really talk to each other, right? You never really saw mom and dad just sitting on the couch, just having dialogue, just having conversation, right? Whether it was the weather, whether it was your grade, whether it was what our vacation will be, but never really ever seen them communicate or have conversation. Like how concerning that is, because now you don't model that, right? Like y'all are almost like planets just in orbit of each other, but never really making contact,
Absolutely.
just orbiting each other's space. So I think that that's so important for, right, and we kind of slow it down here in any relationship that we have, that we understand the importance of dialogue and understand the importance of communication, because it literally will be part of your foundation and really be the determining factor on how much you grow, how much you evolve, but also how well you stay connected.
Right.
Because the person that you're most intimate with, if that's the person that you talk to the least, that's the person that you share the least with, that is such a huge red flag, right? If you have to go to your girlfriends or your mama more than you can go to the person that you lay next to,
problem,
that you've made vows with, that is definitely a problem. That's definitely a concern. Or even we touched on social media. Are you always going to social media?
right?
People know when you're going through because you
Right, because all your
updated.
posts and stuff, yeah, yeah. But you ain't
All
saying
your
nothing,
posts are the shit.
right? But you ain't saying nothing to the person you relationship with. If you don't go talk to her and get y'all some couples therapy, what the hell? My
Right?
Facebook,
Like one moment your pictures up, the next minute the pictures down.
right? You done changed your relationship status about 3 times this month. Now, what's going on?
I'm following each other like, okay, but ain't nobody talking to each other. All this stuff is happening, right? Communication is happening, but not proper communication. Because when you made them changes, right, you were sending a message. Whether they received it or not is something totally different. And I think it's so important that, again, as we reflect on relationships, this is February, and as we look at, it's a time that many people do a lot of talk about love and relationships, and I think it's important to relationships. But I think it's so important that we examine all the relationships in our lives, because all of them impact and shape us in some fashion or form.
Right.
And it's always good to do an evaluation of relationships, because sometimes we stay connected to folks, right? Because we're loyal to a fault, or because we feel like, well, we're related. I gotta stick here. I gotta keep them in my life. I gotta keep that door open, no matter the fact that they're toxic, right? No matter the fact that they're abusive, the fact that they're negative, but all because we have some DNA in common that we have to stay connected. Or, well, we've been friends for 20 years, even though they done did some like shady stuff, but the years count. And I think that's where we have to really do some evaluation, because some of the reason why we have been stagnant or lack progress is of who we've been connected to, who we have allowed to stay attached to us. And some of that is that because we're not making room for the new.
Right.
Right. There's some new relationships that need to be formed. There's some relationships that need to be re-examined, right? And not to mean that everybody just go away, start fresh, but maybe we need to reframe some of these relationships. We need to redetermine some boundaries.
Absolutely.
And parameters in these relationships. And all of that happens with communication and having that honest dialogue. And if there's anybody in your life that you cannot have an honest, real, authentic conversation, you gotta question why you're allowing them to be in part of your life, but B, like, why do you accept that?
Correct. What is it about you?
Why would you accept it?
Yeah.
And so I think that's important. I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to take over your space for a little bit, and get in some of your business, but also get some wisdom and insight from you, as it relates to relationship. I am a certified life and relationship coach, so I love all things relationship and really digging into other people's perception and mindsets about relationships. So I do hope something that we have shared, and said has impacted someone, or at least made you laugh along the way, as we've had our conversation together. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Always insightful. I enjoyed it.
Well, that's it for the zone today. We are officially shutting it down. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And until next time, remember this: be so full of love and light that nothing can bother your inner peace.